Check, check, quick sound check. Can everybody hear us loud and clear? What's going on, Coach Paul?
Hey, Coach Jay and Coach D. Welcome to At the Buzzer. Good to be here.
Welcome to
Thank
At the
you.
Buzzer. Let's get a confirmation in the chat if we can hear us all. Sound is good. And we're looking even
Wonderful.
better because we have the great Deanna Angelo with us today. Coach, I think this is the best we've ever looked. So, D, thank you for joining us. Looks like we're all good here. And welcome everyone to At the Buzzer, our market recap. If this is your first time here, I am Coach Jay. That is Coach Paul. And we have the great Deanna Angelo with us as well. The goal of this segment is to review what happened in the markets for the day. We may talk about some markets that you have not traded before, but we believe our goal as traders is to identify opportunity, see how we could have taken advantage of those opportunities while managing our risk. This is your first time here. I'm Coach Jay, been a Topstep Performance Coach since June of 2023, been trading for the past 12 years and in the futures markets for the past 5. Coach Paul, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we will give it to Deanna to introduce yourself as well.
Okay, I'm Coach Paul. I've been with Topstep for a year and a half as a performance coach. I have 4 decades of experience in the futures market. I'm here to share some of my experience and possibly wisdom to help you become a better trader. And without delay, I'll pass it off to Deanna.
Hey everyone, happy to be here. This is truly awesome. I think this is the first time I'm sharing the stage with Coach Paul. Coach Jay and I have been on together, so it's a big, big pleasure to be here. If you don't know me, I've been trading for 17 years now. 12 years out of that, I've been trading futures for various prop firms, and I kind of specialize in alternative markets, mainly crude oil and gold. But recently, I've been trading a lot of copper and platinum as well. So very happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. As far as news goes today, we did have a US CPI number come in pretty much in line with expectations. We talked a little bit about that number maybe giving us some clarity, especially in the equity markets about direction potentially. But inflation numbers in line with what the market expected, and what we saw as far as a reaction to it was pretty muted. Any other news or anything like that that you guys want to talk about, Coach Paul D, that was important for your trading today, or do we want to just get right into the charts?
I'm gonna go right into the charts myself. I'm a chartist. How about
Yep.
you, D?
Yeah, I mean, CPI was important for copper because it does have a big impact, inflation outlook and stuff. It does correlate really well with copper. Some of the other releases, they're not that major for this particular product. But yeah, for me, it was important not to get chopped up around the release. So, let's get into the charts and then we can talk about setups and what was there. So yeah, CPI was something to be wary of for sure. But it actually brought a pretty nice trending day for myself, which I was able to capitalize on.
Um, Thank you for that. So let's get right into the markets. There are about 35 different markets that we can trade with Top Step accounts, not just the equities. And part of the reason that we have Deanna on here, and what I love with trading with D, is you trade some of the alternative markets. So we definitely want to get into some of those, what you may have been looking at today. But to the downside, we have micro Bitcoin futures down 1.63%. Wheat futures down 2.08%, and soybean oil down 2.34% for our biggest percentage mover to the downside. To the upside, we had the Dow up 0.17%, the Mexican peso up 6.65%, and nat gas, our biggest percentage mover to the upside at 2.96%. To round out our big four, we had the S&Ps up 0.12%, the Nasdaq down 0.07, crude oil down 0.21%, and gold down 0.96% for our biggest percentage mover to the downside out of our big four. I'm gonna pull up a Nasdaq chart real quick. We did take some house account trades in the Nasdaq today, and it did pretty much what we've been talking about over the past couple of days, Coach and D. A lot of consolidation in the equity markets right now. If you're a breakout trader, this is not where you want to be. I don't think. There's some pretty wide ranges, but it's a difficult market to trade, especially if you find yourself somewhere in the middle of the range. Uh, D, have you been looking at the equities much at all?
Well, yeah, this morning I was actually on short DAX. So in
Okay,
my private account, I was actually up 2.7K on the day.
nice.
And that was a short. It was really drama free. I got off the stream and I looked at DAX like I normally do. That's around about the time that I find my setups, and I saw that it was looking pretty bearish to me. That we already had equities kind of doing a bit of rounding at the top, so there was a good chance that it was going to go down. And I just entered the short and it pretty much just went. So I was like, okay. So I took
Nice.
decent kind of 3R multiples out of that. I typically use about 35 ticks on DAX these days, but we can't trade DAX yet. It would be an awesome product for us in Europe and UK once it does arrive. I know they're working on it. So yeah, that's the only equity index that I actively trade these days. I do have to look at ES and NQ because I have some coaching clients who trade that quite a lot. So I did look at it, but to me it was opening inside balance. We have a bit of a bracket on the daily chart. It wasn't really enticing me for the New York session personally, but I know that a couple of people took advantage of the longs, so that was a pretty good thing to do.
What about you, coach?
Wh-
You look at the equities at all today?
Yeah, I gave a lot of money in the S&P. It is not my kind of day today. Um, it was violently unchanged. Um, and I had made about 4 trades, S&Ps, but I made it back in the bonds and in the
Nice.
Japanese yen and in the 10-year and Bitcoin. But
Yes.
whatever you trade today in the equities is the day why I swear I don't want to trade them ever again. But that's part of the journey as a trader. Um, and days like today, if you are not focused and you're not taking care of your account equity, it's easy to get lost and blow out accounts. So,
Looking at the daily
Yeah.
chart on the Nasdaq, pretty much a doji, like you said, Coach, violently unchanged. We had range to the upside, to the downside, and closed fairly close to where we opened. I want to go over the house account trade that we had real quick. We know we had CPI that came out in the morning, and let me fix this because I don't like the way this looks. Put that on the bottom. There we go. So we had CPI out this morning. The range of that CPI candle was 21,133 to the lows and 21,223 to the highs. So about 100 point range in that CPI print. And where we opened up for the New York session, right in the middle of that range, presented a decent opportunity to take a short. If we look at VWAP anchored to CPI, it was a resistance pretty much the entire way down. I think when we were trading it on the house account with Jerome, who was on the big board, a really awesome trader and just a brain doctor, which I thought was even more impressive than his trading on the big board. Uh, we were looking for a short, but I think pretty hesitant around the middles of this range because it's in the middle of the range, right? It feels a little bit more 50-50 here. We ultimately did get into a short somewhere near the lows of the opening range, looking for a potential move lower down to 21,000. But then if we look at a higher time frame chart on the Nasdaq, we talked a little bit about this candle here, which was from the election results, and yesterday's low it ended up being was today's low as well. So we bounced off of here. Uh, I think at this point, Coach, it was we saw that J trade, if we want to call it that, the high volume
yes, we
on
do.
this the 3 minute on the 3 minute chart, and I called this one out. And if I'm reviewing my trading day today, I'm upset with myself for not taking this trade. Um, higher volume in this 3 minute candle than we had on the open and in the CPI candle. And I think I said it when it happened that this candle may be setting the low for the day. Um, and I'm gonna go back and rewatch that one a couple of times, rewatch the game film, and try to figure out why we didn't take the trade. But we can see 50% of that candle start to hold. We close outside of it. Ultimately, we did get in a long. And the one thing, and I want to ask you both about how you view trading range bound markets. It's because sometimes I think we don't get the best trade location in range bound markets with a lot of overlap. We took a long at 21,130, 140, we'll call it. And my thought process in that long was I think we're right on the idea that the market's going to go up, but we probably need to keep the stop pretty wide on this in order to not get wicked out. Ultimately, we got wicked out on this move here that tested the range of that high volume candle. How do you guys approach setting your stops for range bound markets? I'm going to go with you first, D.
Yeah, so with the range bound days, it took me a really long time to get pretty decent at them. I would
Mhm.
say from the beginning of my trading, it probably like 7 years before it kind of clicked what I'm supposed to be doing with them. And it was in great part because I started looking at the profile day types. Now I know you've done a video with Coach Ray in Discord about the day types. And I think that the neutral day types are very, very difficult to trade any kind of range bound markets. One thing I will see is that usually a range bound day should see the larger time from analysis. If you're in a bracketing market like we are in the ES, for example, it means that the value areas, aka the distribution curves from the previous sessions, have started to overlap.
Hold
That's
on one
never a
second,
good
D.
state.
I'm getting a
Mhm.
little bit of an echo from you. I'm trying to figure out where that is coming
Oh,
from. Uh,
I can't hear it on my end, so.
let's see. Give me one second.
Mhm.
I'm gonna send you a microphone request. I think if you can switch to that microphone. Um,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Try it again. Nope. Now we lost your audio. Try that one more time, D.
1 2 1 2.
Oh, there it is.
It's that echo again.
Mm. Gremlins.
Once we were giving out too much good information, and then they tried to confuse everyone. Uh,
Yeah, it's the Goldman entrance.
huh, where is that feedback coming from?
It's the
We will try to
gremlins under the Atlantic Ocean.
we will try to figure that out, Coach Paul. If you want to talk through how you look at setting your stops for range bound markets, and I'll try to figure out D's microphone.
Okay, my stops are the same. Whatever the time frame that I'm trading in. Um, right, I trade in a half hour bar. If I make a position, I look at the average true range and double it. So, and today, my stops were roughly 20 points, $1,000 in the S&P. Doesn't mean I'm going to lose $1,000 every time. I traded that against the 200-day moving average, excuse me, 200 bar moving average in the half hour, and I still got chopped up. But days like this happen. They're not my best days. I limited my losses. Um, so I'm not going to do well on days like this. So to I have to have good um, risk management. Mine is two average true ranges. So if it was in the 5 minute, it would be whatever the 5 minute is. I think it was like four handles and consistently do it. And here's the big thing, and you've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. Days like today can blow out your account if you're chasing. Um, Even if you're not chasing, um, the daily loss limit in my account is 12% of my trade equity. Um, so I can preserve the account because not every day is like this. So even if I'm following my plan and I'm using risk management, I can still get torn apart. Um, Number one, preserve your equity. Um, I would say don't lose more than 15% of your trade equity in any single day, and you can survive because that is number one priority. How about you, coach?
Give me 1 second. I think I figured out D's audio, so I'm gonna mute us both for a second.
Okay. Um, Using that, by the way,
Hey,
not
coach.
all markets were choppy. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Let's do a quick sound check on Deanna's microphone real quick. D, if you want to give us a quick sound check.
1 2 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Sounds good to me now. Let's get a
Yeah.
confirmation from the chat, if that sounds good. Seen some hearts come up in the chat, so looks like we're good
Mm-hmm.
here. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to defer to D on this question, specifically because we had a stop out on the house account trade. So I'm going to get a little coaching from you too. Deanna, when you look at range bound markets, how do you go about setting your stops?
Yeah, I usually wait for a long time before the range actually gets obvious, and then I try to snipe it in two ways. I will either try to look for entries around the edges of ranges or around the second standard deviation zone that I plot from session VWAP. So that's not like to say that you need to pierce that line, the band, but you do need to be somewhere in there, because obviously sometimes if it's a range bound market, it may not take out the session high and low. But my favorite way to trade the range bound day is to just try and snipe the very top of the observable session high and low. And then my stop will be, like Coach Paul says, it's going to be the same size, but usually it's going to be at a better place. So I don't want to be entering with stops where I know everybody else is going to have a stop. And definitely you need to put it away from the high or the low that you can see. And that calls for wider stops sometimes. I mean, if I was going to trade NQ actively, and I have traded it before, it's not like, oh, I'm going to trade NQ. I have, I just don't like it. That's a whole different problem. But for me, a stop in NQ cannot be 20 points. That's like nothing. You have 1,000 ticks in a day, and you're effectively using what, an 80 tick stop? That's like such a minute, tiny little stop for any sort of situation. Maybe if you were to go like breakout trade in and out, that could work. But I think we need to think about the strategy and stop loss placement for certain trades. And we haven't been terribly successful in doing that in the house account, probably because there's like, it's a committee trading, is difficult. But yeah, so to me, a wide stop would be a 35 handle stop in NQ, which is like 140 ticks. And that has been pretty good for me to give me time to decide whether the trade is valid or not, and also to give me room. But I know that many people are like, well, I want to, not risk that much. Well, go into micros. There's always ways to size out. Like these days we have micros, utilize them. And it's still going to be a fair chunk of cash, obviously, but it can still be a very good trade. Small stops have never worked for me ever. Like I always have a disaster stop, and then if the trade goes my way, that's great. But if it starts to kind of wiggle back into the entry, that's where I want to have time to decide. And I think this is where NQ gets very difficult for a lot of people. As soon as your trade is in drawdown, you start experiencing emotions, and then if you're sizing up, you're kind of all, getting yourself in a tizzy, and everything starts to bubble up. You experience a myriad of emotions, and that's where mistake starts to happen. Now, if you get whipped out in 3.5 seconds, what's that going to do for your psyche? If you are right on the trade, but you're now not making money. And same thing goes for putting stops to break even too soon as well. I don't do that, because I think I'm pretty good at figuring out whether a trade is valid or not, and then trusting myself to make that decision. I know that many people can't do that, maybe yet in their journey. But yeah, for me, tight stops just don't work, especially in a range bound market where you're not sure, are we going to break out? Are we going to turn around? And then you're putting stops, from what I could see, kind of in the middle of the initial balance, if that's what I'm, because I actually had to do a little nap today before we did this, so I didn't get a chance to actually watch the actual fast markets trade. But Jay,
So
we talked about it a little bit earlier, and from what I can tell, you were kind of putting the stop in the middle of the initial balance, and that's a terrible idea for a range bound day potential, right?
agreed. Yeah. So our stop ended up being about a 20 point stop. And I thought, and this is a whole conversation, right? Because ideally, we want to get, if we're in a range bound market, we want to get entries as close to the low as or high of the range if we're fading the range as possible. I
Yeah.
think when we got into the trade, it was the realization after the fact that we got in that, hey, I don't really love this trade location, but if we're going to accept this trade and it's going to be right, then we just have to accept that extra risk. Now, do we putt the trade and look for better trade location? Do we just widen the stops and lower the position size that we're in? And I think that's a conversation that traders have with themselves in real time, right? Because you might think, hey, this is the one. And then you realize it's just like, oh, wait, I'm in deeper water than I thought I was in, right? I would like
Yeah.
to be in a much better position, but I'm not. So now how do I manage this? Do I keep my stop the same and accept that same risk? Do I lower the position size? And I think we made a decision to move the stop up in the interest of limiting the risk on the trade. But when you do that, sometimes, and I think when you do that, and you keep a dollar amount front of mind, and again, this is just us doing a little bit of trade review here,
Mhm.
you forego what the market structure is for your account structure,
Yeah. So
right?
here's
And
a thought. That trade, just looking at what it was. So we opened inside
Mhm.
value, went below it. So
Yep,
the trade idea was actually pretty spot on.
yeah,
It was responsive buying below value, which is what you should be doing on an inside day, right? So you open
right.
inside value, they try and move it outside, you fish for the buyers. But again, it's such a shame because that's actually a great trade idea, but just stop loss placement let us down a bit. So
Well,
yeah,
another
maybe
thing
some. Yep.
in that is, if you're not comfortable with it, you can also pare down the size. And I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that um, isn't focused upon as
Mm,
much as it needs to, because that was, I mean, first of all, I know that trade. That's a J trade.
mhm.
It's it's a very non-random setup. Um, we have the spike in volume, a rejection of that selling, VWAP, um, getting over VWAP. Now, if you're, we talk about you have to be comfortable in the risk on any trade. So at this point, if there was, if the, I would suggest at that point you still like the trade, but you're not comfortable with the possible risk, size down. That's
That's
the beauty.
generally the idea as well. Whatever problem people have, size down.
Definitely. So we spent a little time on the equities here. Definitely want to move on and ask you guys, what else did you trade today? Because there were a lot of markets moving. I know we had, some nice movement in Bitcoin. D, you had some copper trades. So why don't
Mhm.
I switch over to your screen, D? You can
Yep.
walk us through what that copper trade was. We had some really
Mhm.
nice movement in gold as well, but I want, D to be able to talk through her trade, and then we will get back to gold. So I'm going to switch over here. Let's see what I'm like with the production. And there we go. We got these charts up now.
All right, cool. So on the left-hand side, I have the full copper 30 minutes just for reference and the levels that I was drawing today in during the London session, actually. So my first trade was actually during the London session, and I bailed sort of just over 1 hour, I suppose, ahead of the CPI release, because obviously CPI can be impacted, the copper can be impacted by CPI, and I decided to exit, book some profit, and then see whether there's another opportunity. But the basic premise of this trade was the fact that we had some developments on the daily chart in copper. Now we've been range bound for I don't know even how long, right? It was like
Very long time.
range bound, yeah. And then it tried to break out and wasn't successful. We had a supply somewhere from 445.50 and then all the way up to 450.30. And as soon as the price was there the next day, we saw huge selling coming in. Then we had one huge day of recovery. So this is pretty much like it's insanity kind of moves for copper. However, after this nonsense, we started breaking out. So my first thought was, okay, so we broke out below this low. And like I can see this as a new trend continuation after a breather. So I came in as soon as I saw the chart, and I was like, this looks pretty bearish to me. So why don't I try and see some of the intraday levels, where we're opening in relation to value, where's the option, where are the option interest levels. And I saw that 415 was actually a put support area. We opened below value for London. I use the shortened London regular trading hours. If you've ever been on my stream, you know that I don't like to pollute data from various sessions and the overlap, because I think the overlap introduces a lot of volume. So when I do my calculations for these sort of things, I tend to use the time of London Open all the way up to COMEX Open. And that gives me
Interesting.
pretty
So
decent
D,
levels. Yeah.
D, just real quick. So one of the things, and I'm going to pull up my charts really quickly because I want you to explain that. And we've been talking about copper a little bit because it's been consistently in the top percentage mover list. So I'm going to pull up the
Yep.
copper chart really quick. And one of the ways we've been looking at all of these markets is, looking at the Globex session opening range, right? Which is
Yep.
this first 30 minutes here. But what I hear you saying is that you are removing this information. And we've also been seeing a lot of these markets trade really well during the London session. So
Yep.
you're kind of omitting anything that happens before the London Open. Is that correct?
I wouldn't be omitting it. I
Okay.
note down where the Asia low and high were, and
Okay.
then I will maybe sometimes do a scalp if we go through those and start to reverse with quite some volume. So this is
Okay.
actually where something that I've learned from you. If you smash through a low with quite some volume, but then the next candle is also pretty big volume, but goes back into the range, to me that would be a scalp, kind of like a stop run through the previous session lows. And it happens a lot. Copper is not that whippy, though. It's not, it's not as crazy as some of the other products, which is, I think, why I've gravitated towards it. But yeah, my main way of looking at the levels where I want to be involved is when we open with short overnight inventory. So they've been short, and now we come to London Open and we remain below that area. Now, sometimes we can test the edges of value, but as long as we don't have a committed move through it that immediately just keeps shooting up, and up, that actually remains a bearish signal for me. Another thing that was quite easy to read for me today, which is something that you won't see a lot, saying, oh yeah, it was an easy day. It wasn't, it's never easy, but today was a little bit easier. There was a former put support from yesterday. So a lot of options interest around 415. And today we tested it, and that's actually what I was stalking this morning. As soon as I got a 15-minute candle reversal, that was my first trade. So you can kind of see that on
Nice
this
trade.
use micros. And then I
Coach
held
D,
it.
Coach
Yeah.
D, can I ask one question? Do you use 15-minute charts?
I use all sorts of charts. So I don't, at this point, I wouldn't say, oh, yeah, I definitely use this. I will use whatever is appropriate for the day type. So if I'm looking for, a more scalpy type trade, I will use a 100-tick chart and bookmap. But I always, always, always have 30 minutes on another screen in my charting package. I also even have 3 and 4 hour charts just to get like a general gauge of where we've been over the last 3 hours or so. But that's more applicable for like the later parts of the session. But for my entries, I will use anything from 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 100-tick charts. It really, really depends what I'm trying to do. And for this particular trade, I'm trying to think. I think it was a failed auction, but because I had pretty good levels, it really didn't matter what sort of a setup it was, because I was looking for a larger move, which I ended up getting later on. So yeah, I will use a variety of things. I use a concept called Uloops. You've heard Anne-Marie talk about them. I actually teach that. I've been teaching that for like 5 years in my in one of my courses,
Heard
and
you talking
people know
about that
that
with your
I like
VIPs, Coach Paul.
to.
Yeah, I've been using them for
Yeah.
a long time too.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it's a great concept. I heard you talk about it as well, and I'm like, okay, this is probably the first time that I'm hearing people that, and I learned it from another prop trader when I was working in office and stuff. So obviously, that's something that's been kind of like a guarded secret of pro traders. It's like, yes, we use Udo loops, and yeah. So the whole premise of using those sorts of loops is that you have an orientation level, and then as you're jumping through time frames, you want to see whether the trade is playing out and whether it's giving you something in the same direction of your trade. Obviously, people go a little bit too into the rabbit hole where, anything against their trade, they will just get out. But I do have some rules over when my trade is still valid and when it isn't. And for that, I use a little ribbon of 9 EMAs on a 100-tick chart, or I use Bookmap as well. So if you start to see a lot of big volume in the opposite direction and they just push, usually that's the sign for me to bail. So I'm like, okay, that's not really what I wanted to see here. But yeah, we'll use a combination of time frames as and when required. If somebody's a newer trader, I would probably say stay away from super low time frames, or at least if you're going to have that, have another chart with a 15 or 30-minute time frame where you can kind of not get lost too much in like, I mean, I see people using 15-second charts. It's like, okay.
In the weeds, in the weeds. Just real quick,
Yeah.
and then we can go back to D. This is an amazing trade in copper, by the way.
Thank
The
you.
the level that you have there with that put support. If you shorted there, your drawdown was what, a couple of
Yeah.
ticks, maybe.
Yeah, you can see my actual entry here. So it was like slightly below that because I was looking for the actual entry. So my entry was 413.70. So I didn't rush. I just let it play out.
Um, the OODA loop. Can we just quickly explain what an OODA loop is?
Yeah,
Coach
it
Paul
stands for
or D.
ODA, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. So Coach Paul, you can take it from here.
Sure. It was developed by one of the best Air Force fighter pilots, and it was used. He developed it to have focus while in battle. Um, why? Because you're under pressure, right? We can all go and look at our chart and go, "This is where I will buy it, and this is where I'll sell it," and there's no pressure in it. So but when you have a position on, you are feeling the pressure. So I was actually turned on to it by a guy trained, oh God, I won't tell you how many years ago, was an Air Force Academy graduate. Um, so what it wants to do is take out all the noise of your emotions. Um, where you're just focused, here it's observe. What are we observing? Well, we're observing the market and its actions so we can orient ourselves. Do I want to buy it or sell it or stay away? And then when you see your setup, you can decide and act. And why it's called a loop, once that's in, you go back to the front, to the start of observing what happens. And especially in shorter time frames, like you talk 15-second time frames, you're going to
Yeah.
get a lot of noise and you're
Gonna
going to
observe a
fight a
lot.
lot of
Yes,
you're going
you're gonna
to
observe a lot.
observe a lot. And what is that doing to your your emotions? You're all over the place. I mean, thinking if you're in a battle, you have to focus on just a few things. You can't be thinking about, wow, that guy who just shot at me. If wonder what he was thinking. You don't know. You have to be on point at all times while in battle. Um, what I would say too to help that is come your decision making needs to come down to four steps if you're going to get it, because I think anything more than that creates a lot of indecision. And I think indecision happens under pressure is the death of good trading. Um, because without that guiding post, what happens? Well, I was really thinking this was going to rally, but I'll gladly take 5 ticks. But when you entered it, it was, well, I, my my objective is to make 20, and you cut off a winner. What what happens in that? That's an emotional decision. So
Mhm.
when you get into an OODA loop, you've got it down to just objective points that you follow. And the more you do that, the better decision maker you become.
Sure. Coach,
Absolutely.
you had shared a book with me the other day. I just bought it and I'm about halfway through it now. You mind me sharing that on the stream with
Oh,
our
sure.
viewers? So what Coach Paul was just talking about, the way of the hunter warrior, how to make a killing in any market. I think this is a very interesting book. I just got it today, and I'm about halfway through it. But one of the quotes I see in this book, Coach, and it kind of goes back to what you were just saying, and D as well. The thinking must be done in camp. Constant thoughts of safety are dangerous. Right. Think about that for your own trading. Right. Think about and everything that we've been talking about. Where stop placement goes, where what an entry looks like for your trades. If you're thinking about that when it's already time to make the decision, it's a little bit too late. And then the second part of that quote, constant thoughts of safety are dangerous. When we're trying to figure out the quickest way to get to green on a trade, or to limit loss after we've already decided, we make decisions that are more than likely emotional decisions, right? Because hey, I'm feeling this feeling of uncomfort. I'm not safe. So what's the quickest route to safety? If we plan what these things are before we get into the trades, then we're okay with whatever that stop is. So really great conversation here. If you like this conversation, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. I haven't done it yet, so I'm going to do it myself. But really, really, really good stuff here. And Coach, I love this book. Again, anyone that if is interested, The Way of the Hunter Warrior: How to Make a Killing in Any Market by Julian Snyder. Um, Coach Paul was on Topstep TV talking about making analogies between trading and hunting the other day, and I think this is a really good read so far. So thank you for sharing that, Coach. Let's get back to the charts a little bit. Uh,
Yeah, I've been trying to. Somebody said in the chat if I can map out my trades. So this is what I've been
okay.
clicking and doing for the last
Yeah.
few minutes.
Yeah,
So
go ahead,
there,
D.
this is all my trades for today. That's like 3 trades. That's it. So basically, the first one just over 1 hour. Second one smash, and then the third one again a little scalp in the other direction post on my cut. And it was like I said, it was a pretty drama-free day for me. It doesn't happen that often. So obviously, there's times when the day doesn't go well or it doesn't start well, and that's with the emotions, and Uloops can actually help you just to figure out if you are on your A game, B game, C game. If you're not reading the market well, what I like to do is take a break for like a couple of hours or so, and then come back and see whether the orientation levels are there first and foremost. If I don't have any orientation levels, like the other day somebody was asking me about GC, and I was like, all my levels are gone. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, I have no orientation points. Like, no orientation points, no levels. It just traded through all of them, right? And those are the type of markets that people are like, oh my God, this is such a great opportunity. But I actually see them as dangerous because there's no good way to limit risk. You've missed the
Interesting.
boat. And then what are you doing? Just getting chopped up trying to chase a train. That's
So
already
D,
left the station and people are like waving.
D, I have a question for you on that point then.
Yeah.
You said, if the market that you're looking at doesn't have any orientation points for you to take a trade, how many markets do you scan to see whether or not they're presenting an opportunity to you? Because we have some traders that say, you know what, I'm a S&P trader, I'm a crude
Yeah.
oil trader, I'm a this trader.
Mhm.
How many markets do you scan to look for those opportunities? And then when you find one, and I think I know the answer to this, but when you find one, are you looking other places after that point?
Yeah, so I'm of the camp that if you're a newer trader, you need to hone your skills on one thing first. But the longer you are in this game, as you guys already know, you get to a point where you develop a systematic way of looking at things. So you know what you're looking at. You know your setup. You're pretty confident what should happen there because you've seen it a million times, and that is then transferable to other markets because at the end of the day, we trade price. So when I get to trade copper, I traded gold for 12 years, and that's very, very similar. I would say the copper is actually a little bit easier because it doesn't whip around as much as gold. So from that point of view, all the setups that I have in gold are directly transferable to copper with some minor tweaks. So I look at probably about 5 or 6 things. Some of them are a little bit correlated, like for example, RBOB and CL, pretty much the same thing, except RBOB is a bit more dynamic, kind of like the NQ of the energies markets. So sometimes if crude oil is like really, really tight and it's not moving much, RBOB can actually offer better opportunities. And then I will use options levels and all of my levels from crude oil, translate them into RBOB, and just use those the same way. So at the moment, yeah, I would say about 5 or 6 markets. And if I don't see anything in, several markets, but I find one, if that one works out, I will be in and out, and then I lock it up and walk away. I'm not really somebody who trades 50 trades a day. I do have days when, I kind of try to bail myself out of a hole. At that time, I would probably do 8 or 10 on the day, and that's usually a bad sign. But if the day starts off well, and if everything is, doing things as they should be doing, according to my plan and my levels, I only need 2 or 3 trades per day, and that's it. I will say that I'm not like, oh, just one. I will trade 2 or 3, but that will also be very much dependent on what the day is. So if does it offer more opportunities? Jay, you talk about it all the time. If you look at this copper chart, like, how many opportunities did we have? Well, really, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities. But by the time that I did my third trade, I was already pretty, pretty nicely up on the day. And why continue? I made my money. It's like,
Did your
go
job for
do
the day.
something else. Yeah, exactly. Just make an executive decision to end your trading day.
I love that. Let's get back into and D again. Thank you for sharing this copper trade. I've been trading copper a little bit more as well myself recently,
Mhm.
um, and it's a great market to trade. I see that you were trading in the micro copper,
Yeah.
which is a great way to limit risk. Coach
Yeah.
Paul, let's see what were you looking at today? We didn't talk. We didn't go through our normal four markets, but I
Yes.
personally like this conversation a little bit better. Um, what were you looking at today, Coach? I know micro Bitcoin was on your list. We did see a continued sell off in gold today as well. What was it for you today, Coach?
Um, the micro Bitcoin, good buy, and I had a great exit. But if we go to the half hour early in the session, when we were lower for most of European session, but we got over the uh, 20 bar moving average, and VWAP went along with it. To me, that was a very low risk trade. Um, we've talked about this for about a year now. You can you can be very comfortable trading micro Bitcoin. It's very, I mean, you could put two on, they're like chips. They're not.
50 cents a tick, right?
Peanuts.
Yeah, it's you could put two on, but I like leveraging down and giving it more room. It's not for everyone, but this trade was a classic. It's in an uptrend. It's over the 200. We had the sideways movement. We had the breakout of that opening range. We were above the 20, um, and I bought it to ATR risk. Now I kept that, and I've been noticing this on those half hour. We'll look at that half hour bars, higher highs, higher highs, higher highs. And then this was almost a J trade. We had that big volume at near the highs. And the market slowed down. And then we had that one sell. We broke that selling. We broke the low of that selling, and I got out. It tried to rally again. I actually didn't watch it the rest of the day. This is kind of the first time I've seen it. We had quite a sharp sell off.
Hmm.
Came right back
Um,
down to that Globex opening range.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and some I see some questions here about OODA loops. It is not a trading system. It's a psychological, emotional um, tool to use while you're in a trade. Why I bring that up? This trade wasn't a miracle for me. They don't all work, but that my observation, if I'm looking for a trade, whether it be Bitcoin, um, rice, oats, whatever it is. I'm looking for that setup. So I'm observing, and then I'm orient. Is this a buy or sell? Can I afford the risk? And then make my decision, act upon it. And I don't. And that's it. I don't. I let it either hits my stop, it gets under VWAP, or it gets under the moving average. Um, and then you know what? I only check it every half an hour for that time frame. So that trade worked in a few different markets. If we flipped it over, that was the copper trade.
So,
Gold
so,
probably was
Coach
very
Paul,
similar.
I actually have a question for you. So it
Mhm.
relates to kind of trade management. So you just said, and then I check it every 30 minutes. So what do you look for if you are, let's say, in a trade, it's doing okay, but next 30 minutes, it starts to turn around. What would you look for to get you out of the trade? Do you have an early exit strategy?
Yeah, in this case, if it got under VWAP, if it got under the moving average that I got in on,
Hmm.
and then I will get out.
Hmm.
But
So
what
that's a part of OODA loop as well for me, because it's like you are tracking what's going on with the trade, and then another orientation point breaks, and you're like, actually, I don't think I will be in this anymore.
Yes,
Am
and
I
in this
understanding
point,
that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's an exit. And what I use my stops as more of ejection seat.
Hmm.
Like I can be that wrong, and it happens. But I rarely. Here's the thing: I rarely get stopped out.
Yeah.
But that's when you measure that, then you can decide. And this is part of the decision. I have to be comfortable that I could lose that. Is that going to wreck my account? Is that more than I can afford to lose on this day if I'm on a risk budget? And if I can't, then my decision making goes either I got to go smaller or just not take the trade.
Mm.
Because in this part, I had my stop in. I don't move the stop up, but I've also in working and in doing this, when you see a move like that, where what was it? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. So eight, but basically 8 bars without going lower than the previous bar. In the short term, if we looked at an RSI, what would we get? We'd be extremely overbought in the short term. But I've noticed if it breaks the low of one of those, the first time it does it, it's basically, what can we say? We found some counter activity. And that actually has helped me take profit sooner. Especially, I'm a swing trader by nature, and I have in my day trading, I have to have a different mindset of taking profit, because in a swing trade, that doesn't mean anything. Really, it's nice, but it wasn't an exit. So and that trade happens somewhere every day.
Amazing stuff here. We got about 10 minutes left. I do want to talk about gold because we did see a pretty significant sell-off in gold. Was close to being, one of our biggest percentage movers on the day. We had, over a 1% move down in gold. And I really want to bring this up because, we've seen that, yes, we may be selling off. This is probably the largest pullback in gold that we've had all year since the rally started. From the highs, we're down about 8%. Um, and this collision course just looks like it's continuing to happen. On the daily chart right now, lows in gold 25.78, and I'm looking at this white line. What's that white line, Coach?
I think it's a 200 bar moving average.
The 200 moving average, trending higher as price in gold is trending lower. We can see when we had that very high volume candle, we that started our sell off. I don't know. I'm just looking at the potential collision of these two, price and this moving average, right around 2,500. Uh, Looks like it's inevitable. Don't want to call the rally in gold over, but as we continue to see Bitcoin rally and gold sell off, very interesting what we're seeing here. Um,
There's a
Gold,
collision course coming.
Yeah.
And one thing on that daily, you noticed, and we're looking at that 20-day moving average. On this rally, it has been ticking up, ticking up. No matter, over time, it's ticking up. And what did we get to a couple days ago? It started ticking down. You can see it's
Started to
curving.
turn. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that happened a couple days ago. Then we got under the 50 when we're talking about this, and now we're getting this is liquidation.
Yeah,
Now,
definitely.
sometimes I have a flair for the obvious, but no, this is liquidation, and it's not overbought. So, um, but with that said, it's still in a bull market if I look at the two. That's my orientation if if I'm an investor. It's
Makes
still in a
sense.
bull market. Um, so looking at that, this is a correction, right? Um, but as a day trader, and we bring it, that's why I look at the 30-minute because I was raised on it. Um, looking at the 30-minute, starting with the opening. Now we're in a bull market. Perhaps I just want to buy it. Okay, now my next orientation is it in the half hour, is it under the 200 bar moving average? No. So there's my decision. I'm not buying it. Okay. Now I could look at this and say it's under the 200 bar moving average. Okay, my orientation is now to sell it. Okay, what's my benchmark for measuring? Well, the first half an hour of Globex is one of them.
Tiny range today.
Ti- Tiny range, and we broke out of it early and had a great buy,
Yeah.
by the way. Now the next one to look at is London Open. I don't know if I'm a little older, but before they used to have the London Gold um, call. Every day you'd hear it on the news. So London is the next important opening. And lately it's probably even the most important opening. But next, look at the London and measure that candle out.
Over here, and then we got New York up here. D, we've been saying you've been having all the fun in London. All of the trending moves have been happening overnight. Um, but yeah, here's London session coach, and it again presented a decent opportunity for a long. Uh, but again, coach, not one that you would take because we're under that 200 moving average, right?
Not one I'm taking. I'm not looking to buy it.
Makes sense.
Now, with that said, we know there's a huge, huge number in CPI. That's one of the
Right.
top four numbers. But the CP now, and this is where I love the way you do this, coach. Frame out the number, that candle, and right there, and this is a classic. We break the low of the half hour, and we have urgency with the VWAP following it. Now, this is why you hear me say I'm only want to take. For me, I watch different markets. I'm up to 12 different markets I watch. So I just take one side. I wasn't looking to sell gold, but if I was, I have some evidence that this market is being sold. I want to go with the flow. Um, and with gold micros, most people can afford that. That risk there, I think, was $200.
Take that. What about you, D? Can afford a $200 risk?
Probably yes, I would say, just about.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think micro gold, a really great contract to trade. We will see whether or not we get a continuation of this move. I don't see any reason to, like Coach Paul just said, to buy gold either. We are coming up on time. I know it is late over there for you as well, D.
Wow.
I want to give you some time back. I know you have a special guest coming on your show tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Tomorrow morning, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
He's gonna
awesome.
have an all-nighter. So yeah,
Very
Dakota
nice.
is gonna he's gonna be very kind to join me tomorrow morning for the London session.
Very nice, very nice.
Oh,
So I'm gonna look at my notes real quick. D, if you have any final words before we go, and then into the London session, let's do that. But any words for our audience before we go, D?
Yeah, just size down. I mean, I know we see a lot of people who are, making 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, and then it's data loss limit, data loss limit, data loss limit, data loss limit, and then you never see them again. So, I'm of the thought that you should take it slow and process over everything. And that means sizing down. I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is. If you build up your account to a point where, you can easily risk 2, 3, 4K, that's fine, but you have to earn that right. So I'm going to leave people with that thought.
Size up. I love that. What about you, Coach Paul? Any
Mhm.
words before we go?
great advice, Coach D. Thanks for coming on. Always enjoy listening to you. And some great advice for traders. This session went really quick.
It did, yeah, yeah.
So one of the things, just to review what we went through today, and it has the biggest one from I see from the questions is OODA loops. Remember that is a framework for decision making under pressure. It's not a trading system. It's something we go over. You'll see it. You can investigate it. I highly recommend it to our traders to get your emotions in track with good trading. With that, everybody have a good evening or morning wherever you're at.
Only final words I have. Thank you, D, for joining us. Thank you, Coach Paul, as always, for another great session. I honestly, selfishly invited you on, D, so I could just kind of take a seat back and listen to you two talk for the most part, and be, a student, right, and ask you guys questions. It's what I enjoy doing. I think we all learn a lot from each other.
Right.
And if I'm awake tomorrow morning at 4:30, I will be joining you in Dakota for that London session as well. But we'll see. I might have to go to sleep a little early tonight. But thank you all. Thank you all in the chat for joining us today. Um, Remember that Coach Dakota is doing slow markets at 7:30 Central. I will be on with Dakota for slow markets, but we do have coaches doing classes in Discord as well. Coach Hoop at 4:30 Central Time in Discord, and then we have Coach Ray at 6 p.m. and Coach Vince at 7 p.m. So a ton of education for you. I see Andrew in the chat said just go for 2 more hours. We're getting pretty close to Top Step 24/7, but we
Yeah.
all got to sleep at some point. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, D.
Yeah, and then if we have good trades on.
Exactly.
Always one eye open.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
No.
night. Trade well, manage your risk, and we will talk to you all tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks.
All right.